Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Welcome to Congregation Beit Tikva, the House of Hope. We're happy to have you with us for this beautiful Sabbath service. Welcome to our Cantor Ephraim Herrera, and Wendy Dankoff, our beloved board member, musician extraordinaire. Let's begin with a traditional Shabbat melody, Shalom, Aleichem. We're on page 142, page 142. Let's join together and sing Yismechu HaShamayim. Let us rejoice with the heavens. We're on page 650 in the Siddur.
Yismechu HaShamayim, Yismechu HaShamayim, Yismechu HaShamayim, Etagel haaretz. Yismechu HaShamayim, Yismechu HaShamayim, Yismechu HaShamayim, Etagel haaretz. Yirayim, hey, Yirayim, hey, Yirayim, Melolo. Yirayim, hey, Yirayim, hey, Yirayim, Melolo. Yismechu HaShamayim, Yismechu HaShamayim, Yismechu HaShamayim, V'tagel haaretz. Yirayim, hey, Yirayim, hey, Yirayim, Melolo. Yirayim, hey, Yirayim, hey, Yirayim, Melolo. Hey!
So we continue now with the blessing over the Shabbat Candles. We're on page 121 in our prayer books. O source of light and truth, creator of the eternal law of goodness, help us to find knowledge by which to live. Lead us to take the words we shall speak into our hearts and our lives. Bless all who enter the sanctuary in need, all who bring the offerings of their hearts. May our worship lead us to acts of kindness, peace, and love.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ציוונו להדליק נר של שבת.
We're reading together in the middle of page 124. We enter this sanctuary to welcome Shabbat. Within these walls we sit surrounded by numberless generations. Our ancestors built the synagogue as a visible sign of God's presence in their midst. Throughout our long history and our endless wanderings, it has endured, a beacon of truth, love, and justice for all humanity. Its presence guided our ancestors to lives of righteousness, holding up to them a vision of their truest selves. Now we, in our turn, come into this sanctuary to affirm the sacredness of our lives. May we enter this place in peace. May holiness wrap around us as we cross its threshold. Weariness, doubt, and flaws within our human hearts, the harshness of the weak, let these drop away at the door. In the brightness of Shabbat, let peace settle upon us as we lift our hearts in prayer. We turn to the Psalms, the Tehillim, that accompany the Friday evening service. We always begin, as you know, with Psalm 95. L'chun Ranana. We're on page 130. Together, come, let us sing joyously to Adonai, raise a shout for our rock and deliverer. Let us come into God's presence with praise. Let us raise a shout for God in song. For Adonai is a great God, a great ruler of all divine beings. In God's hand are the depths of the earth. The peaks of the mountains are God's. God's is the sea, God made it, and the land which God's hands fashioned. Come, let us bow down and kneel, bend the knee before Adonai, our Maker, for Adonai is our God. We are the people God tends, the flock in God's care. Oh, have you but heed God's charge this day. Let's turn to Psalm 98 in the middle of page 133. Sing to Adonai a new song, for God has worked wonders. God's right hand, God's holy arm has won God victory. Adonai has manifested God's victory, has displayed God's triumph in the sight of the nations. God was mindful of God's steadfast love and faithfulness towards the household of Israel. All the ends of the earth beheld the victory of our God. Raise a shout to Hashem, all the earth, break into joyous songs of praise. So we come to Psalm 29. Our Cantor will chant for us.
מזמור לדוד, הבו לאדוני בנעלים, הבו לאדוני כבוד ועוז, הבו לאדוני כבוד שמו, השתחוו לאדוני בהדרת קודש. כל אדוני עול המים אל הכבוד הרים, אדוני על מים רבים, כל וישבר אדוני את ארזי הלבנון, וירקידם כמו עגל לבנון בסריון, כמו בן רמים. כל אדוני חוצב לבודש, כל אדוני חוצב לבודש.
So we continue with one of our favorite Shabbat melodies, Lecha Dodi, words from the Sephardic rabbis who lived in Safat in the late 1500s. We're on page 138, singing together verses 1, 2, and 9. Please, if you're comfortable, we're standing up as we enter into the crucial prayers leading up to the Shema Yisrael. First we chant the Khatsikaddish. We're on page 144 for the Khatsikaddish.
יתקדש ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברך חינותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי לכל בית ישראל בעגלה בעגלה ובזמן קריב יאמרו אמן יש מרבה מברך לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה יתברך יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ונשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה ברכו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תרוש מחתה ונחמתה אמירן בעלמא ויאמרו אמן.
Together we sing the Baruch Hu on the next page.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד.
We read the first blessing together. We're in the middle of page 148. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening into being, skillfully opens the gates, thoughtfully alters the time and changes the seasons, and arranges the stars in their heavenly courses according to plan. You are creator of day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light, transforming day into night, and distinguishing one from the other. Adonai Tzevaot is your name. Ever-living God, may you reign continually over us into eternity. Blessed are you, Adonai, who brings on the evening. Baruch atah Adonai, Amariv Aravim. Together the second blessing in the middle of 150. Everlasting love you offered your people Israel by teaching us Torah, mitzvot, laws, and precepts. Therefore, Adonai, our God, when we lie down and when we wake up, we will meditate on your laws and your commandments. We will rejoice in your Torah forever. Day and night we will reflect on them, for they are our life, and doing them lengthens our days. Never remove your love from us. Praise to you, Adonai, who loves your people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev Amo Yisrael. Let's sing together the Shema Yisrael.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kavod, Malchuto Leolam Vaed.
Please be seated, be comfortable. We continue with the words from Deuteronomy, from the V'ahavta paragraph. We're reading on page 154 in our Siddurim. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha v'chol levavecha v'chol nafshecha v'chol meodecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavcha hayom al levavecha v'shinatam levanecha v'divarta bam v'shivtecha b'beitecha v'lechtecha v'aderech v'shavtecha v'kumecha v'kshartam le'ot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot me'en einecha v'uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha v'visharecha L'man tizkaru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'yitem kedoshim le'lohechem Ani Adonai Elohechem, asher hotzeiti etchem, me'eretz Mitzrayim, v'yot lachem le'Elohim. Ani Adonai Elohechem. You shall love Adonai your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Take to heart these instructions with which I charge you this day. Impress them upon your children. Recite them when you stay at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you get up. Bind them as a sign on your hand. Let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Thus you shall remember to observe all my commandments and to be holy to your God. I am Adonai your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am Adonai your God. Adonai Elohechem Emet. So let's turn to the words of Mi Chamocha, words from the book of Exodus, chapter 15. Moses, Miriam, and Aaron, all the folks are running through the waters of the Red Sea, escaping from the Egyptian army. The Hebrew is on page 158. Continue with another beautiful piece of music, a blessing, the Hashkivenu, which you'll find on page 160 in the prayer book. Cantor, Ephraim, and Wendy are going to offer us a beautiful duet for this traditional blessing.
Hashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu l'shalom, ve'hamidenu malkeinu l'chaim. Shabbat Shalom ve'taknenu betzatova milfanecha ve'hoshienu leman
On 161, let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up waiting to do your will. Baruch atah Adonai haporei sukat shalom aleinu v'al kol amo Yisrael v'al Yerushalayim.
Amen.
So we're continuing with the Vishamru, words again from the book of Exodus. In fact, they're in our Torah portion for this week. We're on page 162 in the Siddur, in the prayer book. Let's turn the page and we begin the 7 blessings for the tefillah, for the essential prayers of the Shabbat evening service. We're on page 164. If you're comfortable, please stand up with us, sing with us. We begin with a verse from Psalm 51.
Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi agit tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, העליון, גומל חסדים טובים, וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם בעזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, בחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע. מכלכל חיים בחסד, בחיי הכל ברחמים רבים. צומח נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אומנותו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לו? מלך ממיט ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל ברוך אתה אדוני מחיה הכל.
The third blessing, acknowledging God's sanctity and holiness, top of page 171. Days pass and the years vanish, and we walk sightless among miracles. God, fill our eyes with seeing and our minds with knowing. Let there be moments when your presence, like lightning, illumines the darkness in which we walk. Help us to see wherever we gaze that the bush burns unconsumed, and we, clay touched by God, will reach out for holiness and exclaim in wonder, how filled with awe is this place, and we did not know it. Blessed is the Eternal One, the Holy God. Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el hakadosh. You're all welcome to be seated, to be comfortable. Let's turn a few pages, and we come to the Ritzei. We're on 174. Our Cantor is going to chant a portion of the Ritzei.
Ritzei, Ritzei, Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu be'amecha Yisrael u'tefilatam be'ahavat tekabel u'tehi leratzon tamid ותהי לרצון תמיד עבודת ישראל עמך אל קרוב לכל קורב אל קרוב לכל קורב פנה אל עבדך וחננו ברוך אתה אדוני שאותך לבדך בעירון עבוד שאותך לבדך בעירון עבוד.
We continue with a prayer of thanksgiving, the Modim Anachnu Lach. Let's read together, top of page 177. God of goodness, we give thanks for the gift of life, wonder beyond words, for the awareness of soul, our light within, for the world around us so filled with beauty, for the richness of the earth which day by day sustains us. For all these and more, we offer thanks. Baruch atah Adonai, Atov Shimcha, Ulecha Na'eh Lehodot. We conclude the tefillah with the beautiful words of Shalom Rav in our prayer book, page 178.
See
Let's pause for our own personal prayers.
יהיו לרצון אמרי פי והגיון ליבי לפניך אדוני צורי אדוני
Before we talk about the parashah, the Torah reading for the Sabbath, let's think of our friends, our loved ones, our congregants, those for whom we offer a special blessing of strength and healing on this Sabbath evening and day. We're thinking of our dear friend Wendy Dankoff, Doreen Hertig, Mark Sanders, Arlene, Flo, and Jeff Vinnick, Lynn Kelly, Cantor Ephraim, Herrera, and his father, Eliodoro Herrera, and also our congregant, Donna Secular. Are there any other names we would like to mention today?
Yes. Lydia Martinez.
Lydia Martinez. So gather all of them in your hearts and in your minds, and we'll sing together the words for Mishaberach, the words you'll find in our prayer book, middle of page 371.
Let
us say,
So we're looking into the words of Ki Tisa. Ki Tisa from the second verse of this Torah portion in the middle of chapter 30. When you take the sum, when you literally lift up the sum, or you count each person's head, kind of like a mustering of all the citizens over the age of 20 before perhaps an army would have to go off to war. It's considered, the opening verses are all about noting each and every person and taking a ransom for their soul. In other words, accounting for each and every soul for possible atonement for their soul. In other words, if they go off and something happens to them, each one is accounted for in the population of the ancient Israelite world. But this Torah portion has so many amazing stories embedded in it. We don't have time to talk about all of them unless you want to stay here with me for another 2 or 3 hours. Just to mention that among many things, many salient features, we have the words of the Bishamru, which we sang with Cantor, Ephraim, and Wendy just a little while ago. And then there's also that famous story or misunderstanding about the rays of light, the beams of light emanating from Moses' forehead when he's after he's encountered the divine. And as you know, one of the church fathers in the 4th century mistranslated the verses in chapter 34 of Exodus, and in Latin, in the Vulgate, it said literally, these are horns emanating from Moses' head. They weren't horns, because the church father didn't understand the meaning of the word carne or. It means rays of light, beams of light. Moses was overwhelmed with the divine presence, and his face was shining with the light of the divine after that encounter. So that's why Michelangelo portrayed Moses with horns coming out of his head. We'll save that for another day. I want to talk about something that goes on earlier in this Torah portion, namely the obsolete commandment. I'm borrowing from some thoughts of beloved Rabbi Sidney Greenberg, who offered this many, many years ago. 2 young boys were coming out of synagogue after a service, and they're kind of muttering to each other, complaining about the sermon. And one of them says to the other, well, at least I never made any graven images. So the second commandment, thou shalt not make any graven images, is so universally observed that you and I might say that it's obsolete. Who bothers with graven images? Who worships graven images today? Do any of you have any statues or matzevas in your backyard and you're bowing down to them? I hope not. But in this Torah portion, in Ki Tisa, we know the famous story of the apostasy of the Jewish people. Namely, that they fashioned a small image, molten image made out of gold, probably yay high, not 4 or 5 feet high as sometimes misrepresented in movies, but the golden calf. People bow down to a golden calf. Sounds rather primitive, does it not? We're way beyond that. Josephus was so appalled by the story of the golden calf that when he wrote his narrative called the Jewish Antiquities, he left the entire story out. He didn't want the Gentiles at that time, the 1st century Hebrew Christians, many of whom were entered into the nascent Christian church, as it were, he didn't want them to think that our ancestors had relapsed into idolatry soon after being at Mount Sinai just a few months earlier. But if you think of it, even today, people are enamored of images. They are enamored of statues. And though it may have been an ancient experience, this experience of idolatry more than 3,000 years ago, I would suggest that it's a metaphor for much of what happens today in our postmodern world. Contemporary life, the writer Will Herbert once said, is ridden with idolatry. Go back just a few centuries and just think of other ancient religions. Think about the Greeks and the Romans. What was the fulcrum, what was the essence of their religious worship? It was bowing down, giving obeisance to statues of Zeus, of Aphrodite, of Neptune, of Hermes, and so forth and so on. These were all manifestations, physical representations of what they considered to be godlike beings. The godlike beings who controlled the world of nature, the natural order, and thus, in a sense, had a profound influence on what happened to human beings as well. That may be 2,000 years ago, but for many, many centuries, people believed that religious system made sense to a great deal of population. So how do we deal with idolatry today? Think of it this way. When Harold Ross, who was the founder and editor of the New Yorker magazine, when he passed away, one of his friends said about him, Harold hated all the tyrannies of the world, especially the tyrannies of things, of objects. In our land, where we have so much that we can acquire, so much we can take advantage of, sometimes we succumb to the tyranny of idolatry. We have a kind of like a material, like an MS of the heart, which overwhelms our desire for acquisition. We're always thinking about more and more stuff, how we can build up our collections. It's a way of perhaps, inflating our ego. I always wonder why people spend half a lifetime acquiring what they consider to be valuable or rare objects, as if to show them off to all of our friends, and then what happens? They wake up one day and realize, what am I doing with all this stuff? Fortunately, many people give their precious items to museums. But what I'm trying to say is, Judaism doesn't abhor wealth and success and aesthetic beauty and all kinds of goodies, but it does say that just to acquire wealth and just to build up one's personal sense of beauty, that is a sin. Because there's much more to life than just acquiring and building and accumulating and making up greater collections. What Judaism says is we have to be alert to the dangers of the idolatry of wealth, to collecting gold and silver, and nowadays people are going for bitcoins and NFTs and all kinds of other things. Who knows what it'll be 10 years from now. What are the symptoms of this idolatry? It means that when we preoccupy ourselves with holding on to stuff, we kind of freeze our hearts. We neglect the health of our hearts. We neglect the sense of moral integrity, which says what is important in our world: compassion for others, righteousness, justice for every citizen in the country. These are moral qualities that are much more important than having, the latest electric car or gorgeous whatever it is that you fancy in your home. We protect ourselves from the golden calf if we remember what really matters in our religious tradition. What really matters is doing good for other human beings. What matters is being concerned with the people down the street who are not quite as well off as we are. In Jewish tradition, it doesn't say that wealth is bad. It says we should strive to be successful and healthy and wealthy, but we should also know that poverty is no great claim to fame. The reason a poor person is sometimes neglected and pushed aside is that they have no voice. When you're poor, your voice is totally diminished. People forget who you are. So when we're strong and healthy and wealthy, we have to remember to lift up the voices of those less fortunate than you and I are. That's why a life filled with precious objects, bought with gold and silver and bitcoins, is not the only way to live. Maimonides put it this way: let the wealthy not revel in their wealth, and let the strong not rejoice in their strength. But what is really important is to know and understand the Almighty. Only when every person energizes every aspect of his or her godly expressions of compassion, sensitivity, and truth, only when we strive to imitate the divine, only then we will truly be rejecting idolatry, and we will be walking in the ways of the God of our fathers and mothers. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Rabbi.
So, good news, friends. Next week we will be in the sanctuary singing and dancing and praying together in person. I know there are some of you out there in the land of YouTube who would like us to continue on YouTube, but we need to get back together as a community. In person, we will be worshiping next Friday night at 6:30 here in the sanctuary. Also, this coming Monday is our Board of Trustees meeting. We'll also be here in the building at 6:30 in the evening. A week from Sunday is a fantastic concert, the klezmer concert extraordinaire. So everyone is invited in the community. We'll be here Sunday, the 27th of February at 3 p.m. for truly excellent klezmer music. So please come and join us. Any other special notes? Thank you, Wendy, for your music, beautiful music. Thank you, Cantor Ephraim. Thank you, Mary, for recording this service. Let's go to the concluding prayers on page 586. 586 is the Aleinu. If you're following in your Sidurim, towards the bottom of the page.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה לעוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
Let's turn to the meditations before the Kaddish. As we think of our loved ones and remember them, their souls, may they always be a blessing to us and to humanity. May we gain wisdom in our lives, overflowing like a river with understanding. Love each of us for the peace we bring to one another. May our deeds exceed our speech. May we never lift up our hand, but to conquer fear and doubt and despair.
Amen.
On this Shabbat, we recall our dear congregant, Judith Kingsley Fitting, we're in the period of Shloshim, 30 days of mourning after her passing. On this Shabbat, we recall with love and devotion as we observe their yahrzeit memorial. Dee Barber, friend of Barb Lamont. Agnes Brenner, mother-in-law of Eleanor Brenner. Aaron Hartman, grandfather of Sonny Rappaport. Mabel Ruth Kempenich, grandmother of Nancy Hardington. Marilyn Kempenich, dear friend of our congregation. Dr. Clifford Vernick, the husband of Joan Vernick. Alvin Weingarten, stepfather of Mark Sanders. And we also remember on this Shabbat, Max Sherman, father of Dr. Robert Sherman, and Sabian Murray, friend of Sonny and Gail Rappaport. Are there any other yard sites to be recalled? Please turn to page 598, and we will recite the Kaddish together on 598. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabba, v'yalma divrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon, v'chayei v'chol Beit Yisrael, v'agalav v'zman kariv v'imru, Amen. Yehei shmei Rabba mevorach la'olam u'amei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yita'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei l'kudeshav richu laila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiram be'alma v'imru Amen. Yehei shlam Rabba min Shemaya v'chayim alenu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh Shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru Amen. Oseh Shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru Amen. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. The Kiddush, the sanctification of the Shabbat day, the words are on page 123.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddeshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho be'ahava v'ratzon hinchilanu, zikaron l'maaseh bereshit. כי הוא יום תחילה למקראי קודש, זכר מציאת מצרים. קיבלנו בחרת, ואותנו קידשת בכל העמים, ושבת קודשך באהבה וברצון הנחלתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. אמן. לחיים טובים, שבת שלום לכולם.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you for being with us.